inside and out. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Detroit Today.
You did it. WDET has secured enough funds to purchase and install the new transmitter. Many listeners gave a little extra or a lot extra during our spring fundraiser. And the Kresge Foundation topped it all off with a grant to get us to the goal of the transmitter. On behalf of everyone at WDET and all of our
Yup.
I extend deep gratitude to
Sons of bitches kept me there almost
who gave us
3.5 hours.
to help us purchase this
It's some bullshit they're pulling.
WDET
I got Coney dogs.
is an offering of stories about land tending, community healing, and regeneration happening right here in Detroit. I'm Anna Marie Seisling, and in the first episode of Rooted, my conversation with Desmond Ingram. There's no community
Love you too, Beetlejuice.
every day.
Ah, okay.
Justice Research, and he's author of the newest book titled Autopsy of the Crime Lab, Exposing the Flaws in Forensics. Professor Brandon Garrett, welcome to Detroit Today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with just the sort of paradigm that I guess we operate with when we think of criminal justice in this country right now. Forensic science is the gold standard in a lot of people's minds in terms of proving the truth, finding the truth in criminal proceedings. And it is seen as much more reliable, for instance, than eyewitness accounts or other kinds of subjective material. Here you're kind of turning that paradigm on its head and saying maybe forensics is better than these other forms of evidence, but it also has significant drawbacks and the potential to be wrong. Talk about that pushback and how you've come to that conclusion.
Yeah, so my Autopsy of the Crime Lab book is designed to really be the reverse of CSI. People watch these shows, people assume that there's high tech, that glamorous looking people in really well equipped labs are producing these super techno matches that can link trace evidence to nail down the quality controls look nothing like what the clinical lab in a hospital anywhere would have in order to make sure they don't botch drug tests or COVID tests or blood tests or anything else. There's unfortunately far too little science in our crime labs. But it's not just the labs, it's how police collect the evidence, it's what experts say when they hit the stand, testify. Every stage in the process is unfortunately rife with error and doesn't have the kind of quality controls that we're all accustomed to when people in white lab coats test stuff that matters.
So give us a sense of how many people you think are in jail or prison today based on faulty forensic evidence. How common is this problem?
We have no idea because we don't do any audits. We don't know what the error rates even are for a lot of these techniques. But just to give you a sense, it was just announced a couple of weeks ago that in Massachusetts they're reopening another 70,000 cases testing by the two main drug testing labs in the accused online PET scandal. We've just learned that there are serious errors, there were altered, changed, malleable results in the crime lab in DC and in its firearms unit. We have no idea. We'll find out over time how far back that goes. When people raise questions, and there were DNA exonerations of people who were convicted based on hair testimony, hair comparisons by FBI agents. The FBI audited 3,000 cases that they could locate. Found that 95% involved unscientific improper testimony. So when we've looked, we've discovered really large-scale problems. But in our criminal justice system, most people plead guilty, and if a lawyer gets a piece of paper saying fingerprint match, firearms match, they'll say, okay, you should plead guilty. People serve their time, and no one even looks at the forensics.
When we talk about this subject, it seems like what you're saying is that the issue
What
is
up, White
not
Tupac?
necessarily the technology,
What up, brother? How you doing?
but the execution
How you
of
doing?
technology in the hands of public officials whose agencies often are not well.
Not much. Just worked 4 hours and got paid
And maybe
for 6.
takes
Which was nice.
technology.
They pull some shit on day shifts though.
Is if we could do this,
They make you stay and stick around and give you a project. And the guys I was working with were production and slow because they're there all day.
Is it possible to do this in
Some
a way that
bullshit.
powerful truth seeking?
It is what it is.
I mean, look, there's a lot of concerns about
It's done with though.
And one of the
I wasn't asked to come back tomorrow. I'm kind of happy. Even though it would have been double time, but it's just some bullshit they pulled. It's been happening. The last couple times I was on days, they made me wait 2 hours before they let me leave. Nights, man, we're good. Later. See ya. Yup, bye. Like you. Later. See ya. Bye. It's all good, folks. Pop in, pop out. Yup. Justice research. He's also author of the newly released book, Autopsy of Crime Lab, Exposing the Flaws in Forensics. If you want to join the conversation, That was the man. Woo!
Evidence and the role it plays.
He was moving too.
Justice and illegal proceedings to replace too much faith against too much emphasis. Give us a call, 313-577-1119 is the number here, 313-577-1119. You can also go to Facebook, Twitter, comments there. And we'll keep the conversation. Brandon, Detroit was one of the most controversy recently on facial recognition technology. And the city police department has been kind of trying to incorporate it into investigations. And they're really clear about the idea that they don't use this technology to make positive IDs, that it's an aid along with other kinds of evidence. But we had someone on the show last summer who was African American and misidentified by the Detroit police and wrongly arrested. I wonder if one of the things that's also going on is the limitation of some of these technologies to actually find the truth, and that you mix that together with undertrained and under-resourced police, and you have a really serious problem on your hands.
Yeah, I don't think it's a defense of policing for law enforcement to say, look, we're just using it for leads, so it doesn't matter how reliable it is. Well, wait a minute. You need to know how good your lead is. I mean, certainly sometimes police might take an anonymous tip from a person, and they don't know how good it is, and they corroborate it, and they do a lot of extra corroboration because they don't know how good it is. But for police to use an algorithm where they don't know how reliable it is, really, really troubling. And you'd expect extreme corroboration and further backup if you're going to rely on something like that, because there's such a concern that these leads slide into identifications. And that's what's happened with a lot of other forensics techniques. You know, it may have been that, you know, looking at a bite mark, looking at hairs from a crime scene, can provide a good lead. And, you know, if it's blonde hairs, then they couldn't have come from my head because I have kind of dark gray and curly hair. But it turned from just providing a lead to these, you know, FBI experts and others testifying in court. Those hairs it's an identification that came from this suspect. And there was never any research to support it. And so, you know, I think cities and some states are even looking into whether facial recognition should be used. We shouldn't rely on an expert who's a black box who just says, I've looked at it, based on my own head, I say it's a match. And we shouldn't rely on algorithms that are black box, that are untested and not vetted. Any more than we should rely on a witness who says, you know, just trust me. Like I saw what I saw. This person did the crime.
And I also wonder about the role of bias and cultural bias in these technologies. Facial recognition technology, I think, is really rife for the idea that cultural bias could play a real negative role. But some of these other technologies, it also seems that, again, the biases that exist in law enforcement make the technologies not work the way that they're supposed to.
Well, and unfortunately, crime labs, you know, people who do forensics work, they're not independent scientists. No one would think that if they're getting a stress test or a COVID test or whatever it is, that the people at the hospital are really biased towards getting a positive result. You know, because they really want to treat you for COVID, or they really want to treat your strep throat. The person who runs the test has no idea who you are, may not even know your name, has no idea what race you are, what age you are. Whereas in forensics, they may be getting calls at the lab from the detectives in the case saying, this dude confessed, you won't believe his arrest record. The reason why we need these fingerprints and fast is that we want to nail him for a murder. All sorts of biasing information. And we've seen in real cases how that kind of information, which is totally irrelevant to the task of looking at the patterns on the fingerprint, looking at the scratch marks on shell casings, that kind of biasing information causes people to change their minds about their conclusions. There's been a lot of concern in the news, understandably, recently about medical examiners and whether they get biased information, particularly in cases of police-involved shootings. And so, we need this scientific work to be truly scientific and independent, and not just in terms of the crime lab having its own funding and being separate from law enforcement, but having their information separate so that they're not seeing themselves as part of the policing prosecution team.
I mean, that would really be a fundamental change to the way this works now. I mean, this is almost all internal, correct, in police departments?
Yeah, or it's a state crime lab or a regional crime lab that's funded by law enforcement that reports to the state Department of Public Safety, that kind of thing. Sometimes the crime lab is part of the prosecutor's office even. Mm-hmm. And you have some independent labs. Funding is independent, but still the only people they report to, the only people they take requests from are law enforcement. So it's basically those are their customers. And there are very few truly independent labs in the country that audit their own work, that take requests from the defense as well as the prosecution. That's just not the way things normally work. Some labs will say, oh yes, we'll talk to the defense, we'll talk to the prosecution. But then, we'll only actually release our reports to the defense if they have a court order. And so, it's a real challenge if you're a defense lawyer and you're worried, like, what is this fingerprint comparison? What is this firearms comparison? Is it right? If you want to get your own expert, you can't do it. Judges will often say, oh, what's the point? It's scientific. It's fingerprints. Fingerprints are unique. Why would you possibly want your own expert? You're indigent, but it doesn't matter. I'm not giving you the funds for that. You can ask some questions of the crime lab guy, and educate the jury by asking some questions. But to actually get your own independent test, to get your own expert to testify about what the evidence shows and what the limits are, good luck. So there's no battle of the experts in criminal cases. It's mostly one-sided presentation of forensics by the state.
Okay, Brendan Garrett, author of Autopsy of a Crime Lab, Exposing the Flaws in Forensics. It was great to have you here to talk about this subject. Thanks so much for
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. Okay, that is going to do it for us today. I'm going to be back tomorrow, and I hope you will too. We're going to take a look at how President Biden is doing in achieving his policy and agenda goals as he comes up on 100 days in office. Plus, we'll talk with a local attorney and former DPT officer about the need to demystify the culture of American policing. This is 1019 WDET-FM, Detroit's NPR station. You're connected to news, music, and conversation. We'll talk more tomorrow.
Looks like it's got 2 eggs in it. Online order for Yeah Man.
Hi, I'm Don Rhodes, and this week's Motor City playlist is titled
Thank
Berkeley
you.
High School. We'll talk about the first artist that signed the Blue Note and play music from Paul Westerberg and Art Blakey. This
Bob
Friday
tomorrow if I
night
want.
on
What up, folks?
It took months and tens of thousands of volunteers to prove that the current crop of coronavirus vaccines work. Scientists are working on a way to do it faster in case we need new vaccines to fight variants.
Everyone in the field is waiting for the results to get more confident, which will help that especially more reliably.
That story and the president's address to Congress this afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Weekday afternoons at 4 on 1019 WDET. WDET is supported by the law firm of Barnes Dickey, celebrating 100 years of protecting clients' patents, trademarks, copyrights, and handling intellectual property litigation needs. Offices in Metro Detroit, Dallas, St. Louis, and Washington, D.C. Info at hdp.com.
After 7 months and 300 million miles, just think about it for a moment. Microbial life existed on Earth 3.5 million years ago. NASA scientists wonder,
How you doing? Welcome to the stream. What's your name? Want a hot dog?
if they find evidence of ancient
Dr. Fish will show you his fish stick.
understand life in the universe. How will it teach us if they don't? I'm Megan Chakrabarty. Today on Point, NASA scientists on the first
Never heard this one before. From over there. Well, yeah, something.
on the red carpet. Stay with us. Live from NPR News, I'm Corva Coleman. President Biden will give an address to Congress tonight on the eve of his 100th day in office. The White House says he'll propose a sweeping package of tax and spending bills. These are aimed at helping low and
Thank you.
Americans. Biden wants to spend $1 billion. That's on top of his
Biden. Millions, billions, and trillions.
Republican support. A
Yeah.
state of emergency is in effect in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. The city is awaiting the potential release of body cam footage from last week's fatal shooting of Andrew Brown Jr. by sheriff's deputies. This hour, a judge will start considering whether to release the full video. NPR's Sarah McCammon has more from Elizabeth.
Why not? The full
Family members
video
say they were allowed to view
tells the
only a
truth.
20-second clip of the body cam footage earlier this week. They're asking to see all of it. Pasquotank County officials say under state law they need a court order to release it all to the public. The family also has released results of an independent autopsy. They say it shows that Brown was shot 5 times total, including a fatal shot to the back of the head. Meanwhile,
Damn.
the FBI has opened a civil rights investigation into the shooting, and North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper is calling for a special prosecutor. Sarah McCammon, NPR News, Elizabeth City.
The coronavirus pandemic is slowing in most parts of the U.S., but there were more than 50,000 new cases reported on
on Tuesday, according to Johns Hopkins University. Michigan is seeing a spike in virus cases. Kate Wells of Michigan Radio reports one reason is because of the growing number of coronavirus variants, especially the one that emerged in the United Kingdom.
It's just really spread like wildfire. We know this is a more easily transmissible variant of the virus. And it hit us at the same time as we were, really pushing schools to reopen in person. We've had a lot of confirmed outbreaks associated with school sports. And unlike in the fall or last spring, this time state officials didn't impose new lockdowns.
Kate Wells reporting. Stocks open mixed this morning as investors await a policy statement from the Federal Reserve this afternoon. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped about 160 points in early trading.
The Fed's policy statement is expected to offer more of the same, near zero interest rates and a steady pace of bond buying to keep long-term borrowing costs down as the U.S. gradually recovers from the coronavirus recession. Consumers are feeling bullish about the comeback. Consumer confidence jumped this month to its highest level since the start of the pandemic. Boeing reported an uptick in 737 MAX deliveries during the first quarter since the plane was cleared to start flying again late last year. Mail-order packages delivered better than expected earnings for UPS during the quarter. The company's results also got a boost from a reassessment of delivery drivers' pension plan. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
You're listening to NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, offering its Home Quote Explorer so shoppers can evaluate options in one place when buying home insurance. Custom quotes and rates are available online. Learn more at progressive.com.
Good morning. It's 10:04. I'm Tia Graham with news from WDET. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I should have been home fucking
The
hours
infant mortality
ago.
rate in Michigan hit a new low in the most recent data from the State Department of Health and Human Services. Chief Medical Executive Dr. Jonay Caldoon says that's good news, but it masks some underlying problems. She says Black and Hispanic babies in Michigan are still more likely than white babies to die before their first birthday.
These things have nothing to do with the actual genetic makeup of people. It has everything to do with racism and structures and resources.
Caldoon says improving access to medical care, housing, and transportation will help even out those disparities. There was action in Lansing towards getting stricter ethical standards for legislators. We have more from Rick Pluta.
A bill adopted by the House Committee on Elections and Ethics with bipartisan support would ban lawmakers from voting on bills that could benefit themselves, family members, or business associates. It's not clear what the penalties for violating that standard would be. But Republican Representative Andrea Schroeder said this would move Michigan in the right direction.
We all know Michigan has ranked consistently low among other states.
Woo! Well, we're home, folks. Later, dude.